They say marriage changes people. But in my case, marriage didn't change him, it changed me. When I first met Ethan Blake, he was already a name whispered with reverence and fear in the corporate world. The youngest CEO in the city, sharp, commanding, and so breathtakingly composed that his silence carried more weight than most people's speeches. I was the daughter of one of his business partners. And our marriage wasn't built on love, it was built on convenience. Two companies merging, two families aligning. A union written in contracts, not hearts.t first. I told myself love could come later. That maybe, beneath his cold exterior, there was a warmth waiting for me to find. But after 3 years, I realized I'd been waiting for spring in a place where winter never ended. Every morning was the same. I'd wake up to an empty bed. Ethan always left before dawn. His side of the bed stayed cold, sheets barely wrinkled, like he never truly belonged there. Sometimes, I'd catch a faint trace of his cologne on the pillow, that sharp, expensive scent that felt like him. Distant and intoxicating. I'd make breakfast for two, though it always ended up untouched. The maids used to ask if I wanted to prepare less, and I'd laugh softly, pretending it didn't sting. He might come home early today, I'd say. But deep down, I knew better. He never came home early. And when he did, he barely looked at me. There's a quiet kind of pain that builds when you love someone who doesn't love you back, not with cruelty, but with indifference. Ethan wasn't unkind. He was just absent. He'd greet me politely when I handed him his coffee, thank me when I reminded him of a meeting. But beyond that, it was like I was a shadow, someone living beside him, not with him. At business events, he'd stand next to me as the perfect husband. His hand would hover near my waist, but never touch. The cameras would flash and we'd smile to perfect masks for the world to admire. People often said we were the ideal couple, poised, elegant, powerful. If only they knew how quiet our house really was once the cameras stopped clicking. I tried to reach him, you know. There was this one night a month after our second anniversary. He'd been working late again. The city outside was glowing, rain streaking down the windows like tears I didn't want to shed. I had spent hours cooking his favorite dishes, dressing up in a soft blue gown I knew he liked once, or at least, I thought he did. I lit candles, played soft jazz, even turned off my phone to make it feel special. When the door finally opened past midnight, I felt my heart leap just like it always did. He walked in, wearing his usual black suit, eyes glued to his phone, a frown creasing his face. "Ethan," I said, my voice gentle. "You're home." He gave a small nod, still typing. "I told you not to wait up." "I wanted to," I replied, forcing a smile. "I made dinner." He finally looked up, his expression unreadable, that same cool detachment that somehow hurt more than anger ever could. "I already ate," he said quietly. "Oh, I didn't cry." I smiled again, because that's what I always did. "Then maybe you'd like to talk." Or he cut me off, setting his phone down with a sigh. "Ariana, I have a meeting early tomorrow. We can talk later. Double quotes later. It was always later, and later never came. That night, after he went into the shower, I sat alone at the dining table, staring at the food I'd made, untouched, perfect, pointless. The candles had burned low, their light flickering like my patience. When he came out, I mustered the courage that had been building for months. "Ethan," I whispered, "can I ask you something?" He stopped by the doorway, towel in hand, his damp hair falling across his forehead. "What is it?" I hesitated. The words trembled on my tongue, so simple, yet so heavy. "Can I have a hug?" The moment those words left my lips, everything changed. He froze. Literally. His eyes widened slightly, his usual calm fractured. The air between us thickened, and for a second, I thought I'd done something terribly wrong. He didn't move. Didn't speak. His hand, the one holding the towel, trembled just slightly. I tried to laugh it off. It's silly, I know. You must be tired. Forget he turned away before I could finish, murmuring, I'll sleep in the study tonight. And then he was gone, leaving me standing there, arms still open, waiting for a hug that never came. That was the first time I realized there was something more to his coldness than I understood, because in that brief, fleeting second, when I asked him for something so small, I saw fear in his eyes. Real fear. Like my words had dragged up something he'd buried deep. Something that hurt just to remember. But he never explained, and I didn't ask again. Days turned into weeks. We spoke less and less. His absences grew longer. Rumors started circulating, whispers about him and Lila Grant, his assistant. She was young, beautiful, and always by his side. When a photo of them attending a business dinner alone surfaced online, Sophie, my best friend, called me immediately. Are you okay, AI? You've seen it, haven't you? I had. The photo was everywhere. Ethan in his usual suit, Lila laughing beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. It's just work, I said, my voice steady, though my hands shook. Sophie sighed. You can't keep defending him forever. Maybe she was right, but love, even unreturned, love makes fools out of us all. That night, I didn't wait up for him. I went to bed early, curling beneath the blanket, pretending not to hear the sound of his car pulling up at dawn. When he entered the room, I kept my eyes closed, breathing slow, pretending to sleep. He paused by my side for a moment. I could feel his gaze on me, heavy, lingering. Then, quietly, he reached out for a heartbeat. I thought he'd touch me, but his hand stopped midair and then withdrew. The door clicked shut behind him. And once again, I was alone. I used to think silence was peaceful. But living with Ethan taught me that silence can be the loudest sound of all. Each unspoken word, each glance avoided, each door closed softly at night, it all added up to something unbearable. Yet no matter how cold he was, I couldn't stop loving him, because somewhere deep down, I still believed the man who froze at my request for a hug was hiding something fragile, something human, something real, and I was determined to find out what it was, even if it meant breaking my own heart in the process. They say people don't notice the moment they fall out of love, it happens quietly. But when you're the one still holding on, you feel every second of it, every sigh, every step away. And one day, the distance becomes unbearable. It had been 3 months since that night, the night he froze when I asked for a hug. We never spoke about it again. He acted as if it had never happened, and maybe that's what hurt the most. Not his rejection, but his silence. Spring came to the city. The streets bloomed with color. Couples filled the CFS again. Laughter floated through the air. But in our penthouse, the cold never left. He was barely home anymore. Board meetings, investor trips, late-night dinners, excuses that filled every day. I used to text him little things like don't skip meals or drive safely. He'd always reply with a single word, okay. Eventually, I stopped texting, and he didn't notice. One morning, I stood by the window, watching the clouds roll over the skyline. My reflection looked back at me, tired eyes, soft smile fading. I didn't even recognize myself anymore. Marriage had turned me into a ghost, a woman who lived quietly so her husband wouldn't feel burdened by her presence. That day, Sophie visited. She tossed her bag on the couch, plopped down, and gave me that look only best friends can. "Ariana, you're disappearing." I tried to laugh. "Maybe it's the lighting. It's him," she said bluntly. "You've been living like a prisoner in a glass house." Her words stung, but they weren't wrong. I poured her some tea, hoping to change the subject. "He's just under a lot of pressure." She raised an eyebrow. "Pressure?" Ethan Blake could command a boardroom full of billionaires without blinking. "He's not under pressure. He's avoiding you." Her honesty hurt more because it came from love. "Then what do I do, Sophie?" "Leave." The word leave felt heavy, like betrayal. Sophie leaned forward, eyes softening. "No, not yet. But make him see you, Remind him you're not a piece of furniture in his perfect house. He either wakes up or you walk away knowing you tried." I nodded slowly. Maybe she was right. Maybe I needed to try one last time, not with tears, not with desperation, but with clarity. So I made a plan. Just one evening. One final attempt before I gave up completely. I spent the day preparing not just food or ambience, but myself. For years, I'd molded my world around Ethan's silence. That night, I wanted to reclaim my own voice. I chose a black silk dress, simple, elegant, nothing loud. I put on the red lipstick he once complimented at a company event, the only time he'd ever said I looked beautiful. I set the table for two again, but this time I didn't light candles out of hope. I lit them as witnesses. When he finally came home, the city was painted gold by the setting sun. His footsteps echoed through the marble floor, steady, detached. "Ariana?" His voice carried the same polite tone he used with his staff. "In here," I called from the dining room. He entered, stopping just short of the table. His eyes scanned the food, the wine, me, then drifted toward his watch. "You didn't have to do this," he said quietly. "I wanted to," I replied, smiling faintly. "It's been a while since we ate together." He nodded, sitting down across from me, loosening his tie. "Work's been demanding." "Work always is," I said softly. The air between us was heavy. The clinking of cutlery was the only sound for several minutes. I studied him in silence, the way his jaw tightened, the way his eyes never met mine, and for a fleeting moment, I saw something flicker behind that cold gaze. Fatigue. Maybe guilt, maybe both. Finally, I spoke. "Ethan, can I ask you something?" He looked up briefly. "Of course. Are you happy?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. His fork paused mid-air. "I'm fine," he said after a moment. "The company's doing well, the expansion is ahead of schedule." "I'm not talking about the company," I interrupted, voice trembling slightly. "I'm talking about you." "Us?" He froze for a second, then looked down. "Ariana, I don't think this is the right time." "When is the right time, Ethan?" I whispered. "Because I've been waiting 3 years for that time." He stayed silent. My heart pounded in my chest. This was at my breaking point. I took a deep breath and stood up, walking around the table to stand beside him. He stiffened, but didn't move. "Do you remember," I asked softly, "the night I asked you for a hug?" His hand clenched around his fork. "Yes." "You froze," I said, almost smiling sadly. "And I told myself it was nothing. But that moment, it's haunted me ever since. Because I saw something in your eyes, Ethan. Something I don't understand." He didn't answer. His silence was louder than any confession. So I kept talking, even as my voice cracked. "I've tried everything. I've tried being patient, supportive, invisible even. that no matter what I do, I can't seem to reach you. I swallowed hard. Do you hate me? That made him look up sharply. No, then why? I whispered. Why do you treat me like a stranger? He exhaled slowly, eyes clouded. Ariana, I'm not good at this. I never was. Some people aren't built for warmth. I smiled sadly. That's not true. You just chose not to be. He looked away. Maybe. The faintest crack appeared in his composure, barely visible, but enough for me to see that something was buried beneath the ice. But I was tired of digging. So I whispered the words that had been resting on my tongue for months. I want a divorce. The air shifted instantly. He blinked, like the word itself struck him physically. What? I met his gaze squarely. You heard me? He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. Ariana, you're overacting. I laughed, a broken, disbelieving sound. Overreacting. Ethan, this isn't a reaction. This is exhaustion. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration flickering across his face for the first time in years. You're talking about throwing away our marriage because I'm not emotional enough. I'm talking about throwing away nothing, Ethan. I cried. Because that's what this is. Nothing. You don't talk to me. You don't look at me. You don't even notice when I'm gone. My voice cracked at the end. I turned away before he could see the tears. He was silent for a long time. Then he said quietly, almost defeatedly, if that's what you want. I won't stop you. The words hit harder than I expected. I waited. Maybe for him to add don't go or let's fix this. But he didn't. And that silence told me everything I needed to know. That night, I packed my things. No arguments, no screaming, just quiet acceptance. The housekeeper tried to hide her tears as she helped me. Ethan stayed in his office. I could hear him pacing faintly through the walls, but he never came out. When I finally stepped out of the front door with my suitcase, the sky was beginning to rain. I looked up, letting the droplets fall against my skin. Freedom didn't feel the way I thought it would. It felt like standing barefoot on broken glass. As the elevator doors closed, I whispered to myself, you had your chance, Ethan, but deep inside, a small voice replied when I tried hard to ignore, he's already broken. You just don't know why. And for the first time in years, I didn't go back. Little did I know. That was the night Ethan's world began to collapse. And that the man I thought had no heart was about to show me just how much it hurt to love me. The first week after I left, Ethan was strangely quiet. No calls, no texts, no apologies, just silence. I moved into a small apartment downtown, far from the penthouse I once called home. It wasn't luxurious, but it was mine. For the first time in years, I could breathe without feeling the weight of someone's indifference pressing on my chest. At night, I'd sit by the window, wrapped in a blanket, watching city lights flicker below. I thought I'd feel relief, freedom, but all I felt was emptiness. My heart wasn't used to stillness. It had spent too long waiting, hoping, hurting. Sometimes I'd catch myself reaching for my phone, fingers hovering over his number. But I never pressed call. I told myself he didn't care, that he was probably relieved to be rid of me, and yet a part of me knew it wasn't that simple, because Ethan's silence wasn't just neglect. It was something else, something heavier, something broken. A few days later, Sophie came by with groceries and her usual energy. She looked around my small apartment and sighed. It's cozy, but I can't believe you really left him. I smiled faintly. Believe it. I think I finally ran out of excuses for him. She placed the groceries down and turned to me. AI, do you really think he didn't care? I know Ethan's cold, but he's not heartless. I looked away. Then why didn't he stop me? Sophie hesitated, then pulled something from her bag, a folded magazine. You should see this. It was a business magazine, the kind Ethan was always featured in. His picture graced the cover, immaculate suit, stoic expression. But the headline below it caught my eye. Blake Group CEO hospitalized after severe panic episode during board meeting. My heart dropped. What? It happened 2 days after you left, Sophie said quietly. He collapsed during a presentation. The report says exhaustion, but she didn't have to finish. I read the article twice. The words blurred, my mind spinning. Panic episode. Exhaustion. Hospitalized. Ethan Blake, the man who never faltered, never bent, never broke, had collapsed. I should felt justified. I should thought, serves him right. But instead, my chest ached, because I knew him even when he hid behind silence. Ethan didn't fall apart easily. Something had pushed him over the edge, and suddenly, the image of him freezing when I asked for a hug flashed in my mind. The tremor in his hands, the shadow in his eyes. Maybe that moment wasn't rejection. Maybe it was fear. Fear of something I didn't yet understand. For days I couldn't stop thinking about it. I didn't go to see him, I couldn't bring myself to. But I started remembering things I'd brushed off before. Like how he'd flinch whenever someone touched his shoulder unexpectedly. Or how he never stayed long at family gatherings, always leaving the moment laughter got too loud. How he'd avoid conversations about the past entirely. I'd once asked him if he ever missed anyone. And he'd simply said, missing people doesn't bring them back. At the time, I thought it was just another cold remark. Now, it sounded like pain. A week later, I ran into one of Ethan's employees, James, at a CAF. He had always been kind to me during company events. He recognized me immediately, his expression softening. Mrs. Blake, sorry, I mean Ariana. It's fine, I said, managing a small smile. How's everyone at the company? He hesitated. Things have been tense. Mr. Blake hasn't been the same since you left. My heart tightened. Not the same how? He's quieter. He barely talks to anyone. He fired Lila last week. I blinked. Fired her? Why? James lowered his voice. No one knows. They had a meeting, she said something, and he just snapped. He's been locking himself in his office ever since. I frowned, confused. Ethan wasn't impulsive like that. He was always calculated, distant, controlled. Something had to have triggered it. James continued hesitantly. I think it has to do with her bringing up his past. You know, what happened to him before he took over the company. I stared at him. His past? What do you mean? He looked uncomfortable. You really don't know? No, he rubbed the back of his neck. I shouldn't be saying this, but when Mr. Blake was 22, he was engaged. Her name was Mia Lang. She died in an accident. I felt my breath catch. James continued quietly. She was hit by a drunk driver outside his apartment. They'd just had a fight. Witnesses said she was crying. She ran after him, asking for a hug. He turned away and then he stopped. Seeing my face pale, my mind went blank. Every word after that faded into static. Asking for a hug. She had asked for a hug, and Ethan froze, just like he did with me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, every piece of the puzzle clicking into place. Ethan wasn't cold because he didn't care. He was cold because he did. Too much. Too deeply, and losing her, Mia, had destroyed him in ways he never allowed anyone to see. He'd built his empire, his reputation, his armor, all to protect himself from feeling that kind of pain again. And I had unknowingly asked him to relive it with one simple, innocent question: can I have a hug? He hadn't rejected me. He'd panicked. Because in his mind, that moment was the same as the one that had ruined his life. I pressed my hand over my heart, tears slipping down my cheeks. For years, I thought he didn't love me. But maybe love wasn't the issue. Maybe he was just trapped in grief, frozen in time, and I had been too blind to see it. The next morning, I found myself outside the Blake Corporation building. I didn't even remember deciding to go there. My body had moved on its own. The guards recognized me and let me through without question. When I reached his office floor, his secretary looked startled. Mrs. Miss Lee. Mr. Blake isn't seeing anyone today. It's okay, I said softly. He'll see me. I opened the door before she could stop me. Ethan sat behind his desk, surrounded by scattered papers. His tie was loose, his eyes bloodshot, and for the first time, he looked human. He froze when he saw me, the pen slipping from his hand. Ariana. I took a step forward. You look terrible. A faint, humorless smile touched his lips. So I've been told. I walked closer. The silence between us was heavier than before. No anger, just raw air. I heard about Mia, I said softly. His jaw tightened. Who told you? Does it matter? He looked away, shoulders stiff. It was a long time ago. I shook my head. No, Ethan. It's not over for you. It's still controlling you. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping back. You don't understand? Then make me understand, I said, my voice cracking. Because I thought you were heartless. But now, I see it, you're just haunted. His hands trembled. Don't haunted by the moment she asked for a hug, and you turned away. He froze again the same way he had that night, and for the first time, I saw tears in his eyes. I killed her, he whispered hoarsely. If I had just turned back. If I had just. You didn't kill her, I said gently. You lost her. And you never forgave yourself. He sank back into his chair, burying his face in his hands. Every time someone asks me for a hug, I hear her voice. I see her face. And I can't move. I walked closer, my heart breaking for him. Ethan, I whispered. You've been punishing yourself for years. But you can't keep living in that moment. You deserve to heal. He looked up, eyes red. How can I heal when I hurt you too? You can start by trying, I said softly. By not running away this time. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us wasn't cold anymore, it was fragile, trembling, real, and for the first time since our marriage began, I felt like I'd finally seen the man beneath the ice. But love, I realized, isn't always enough to fix the broken. Sometimes, it just shows you where the cracks began, and whether you choose to stay or walk away becomes the hardest decision of all. I didn't cry that night. I just stared at the ceiling and listened to the echo of the rain. The room felt colder without him, as if he had taken all the warmth with him when he left. When I finally drifted off to sleep, it was into a dream of our wedding day, his emotionless face, his curt nod at the vows, and the way my father had looked at me with pity. Even then, I had known. But I had chosen blindness over loneliness. The next morning, I woke up early and made breakfast out of habit, his favorite omelette, black coffee, lightly toasted bread. I even placed the newspaper on the right side of the table, just the way he liked. But the seat across from me stayed empty. I sat there, hands trembling slightly, watching the food go cold. That's when my phone buzzed. It was from his secretary, Leo. Madam, Mr. Jin will be out of town for the next few weeks on business. Would you like me to send the chauffeur for your errands? I stared at the message for a long time. No explanation. No goodbye. Just like always. I typed back a short reply, no need. 4 days. I tried to live normally. I went to my part-time art class, took care of the small garden I had planted on the balcony, and spent evenings sketching to fill the silence. But every corner of the house whispered his presence. The scent of his cologne still lingered on the pillow. His cufflinks glimmered on the dresser. The cold, perfect order of his things contrasted painfully with the chaos inside me. Then one afternoon, as I was rearranging his books, I found something, a sketchbook. It wasn't mine. It was tucked behind the novels on the shelf. My fingers hesitated before opening it. Inside were pencil sketches of me, not the flawless, distant image he saw at galas or in photographs. These were raw, intimate moments, me laughing while watering the plants, dozing on the couch with my hair falling over my face, or feeding stray cats outside our gate. My heart froze. These weren't random sketches. They were drawn with care, every line filled with quiet attention. He had seen me. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My mind raced. Why hide them? Why draw me in secret, if he didn't care? That night, I waited for him to call, text, anything. But nothing came. The silence was maddening. I decided to test something. I texted him first. Jin, the house feels empty. When will you be back? A few minutes later, the typing dots appeared, then vanished. After a pause, a simple reply came. Soon. Don't wait up. I felt a sharp twist in my chest. That was all. No affection, no warmth. Yet those sketches burned in my mind, the contradiction of a man who acted cold but drew me in private. The next day, I visited his office under the pretense of dropping off some documents. The receptionist looked startled but greeted me politely. When I entered his office, it was spotless, everything meticulously arranged. I walked around slowly, my heels echoing on the marble floor. That's when I noticed something on the desk, a small, framed picture of me smiling at our wedding. My reflection stared back at me through the glass. He'd hidden it behind the lamp. I swallowed hard. Suddenly, the door opened. Jin stepped in. He looked surprised, not angry, not annoyed, just surprised. Why are you here? His voice was calm but tight. I missed you, I said softly. And I found something at home. His eyes flickered. What did you find? Your sketches. For the first time, his expression cracked. A hint of panic flashed before he quickly masked it. You shouldn't go through my things. I shouldn't have to find your feelings in hidden drawings, Jin. I snapped, my voice trembling. If you care, why won't you say it? Why make me guess? He turned away, his shoulders stiff. Because words are dangerous. What does that even mean? I demanded. He didn't answer. His silence cut deeper than any argument. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. You know, sometimes silence hurts more than shouting. And then I walked out. That night, I packed a small bag. I wasn't leaving him, not yet. But I needed space to remember who I was before I became the wife of a man who never said I love you. As I closed the door behind me, I didn't notice Jin standing in the dark hallway, watching me go, his hand clutching the edge of the wall as if stopping himself from reaching out. The next morning, Leo arrived at my apartment, looking uneasy. Madam, Mr. Jin wanted me to give you this. He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a short letter written in Jin's sharp, elegant handwriting. Don't go too far. The world isn't kind. Take the driver if you need anything. No, come back. No, I miss you. Yet. It wasn't indifference. It was care disguised as command. For the first time, I wondered, was Jin not emotionless? Or just afraid to feel? Days turned into weeks. I started teaching at the art studio again, finding peace in colors and canvas. But every night, I caught myself glancing at the phone, half hoping for a message from him. Then, one night, as I walked home from the studio, I saw him standing under a streetlight, holding an umbrella. The rain poured, but he wasn't moving. His suit was damp, his hair clinging to his forehead. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw something raw in his eyes. Something almost desperate. But instead of calling out, he just said quietly, "You didn't take the driver." I smiled faintly. "I can manage on my own." He stepped closer, his gaze searching mine. The rain pattered softly between us. "I never wanted you to leave," he said, barely audible. I blinked, stunned. "Then why didn't you stop me?" His jaw tightened. "Because I thought, if I held you back, you'd see how weak I really am." That was the first time I saw fear in his voice, not of losing me, but of being vulnerable. Before I could reply, thunder rumbled overhead. He hesitated, then quietly said, "Let me take you home." I nodded slowly. In the car, silence hung heavy. But this time, it wasn't empty, it was filled with words neither of us knew how to say. He glanced at me at every red light, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. When we reached my apartment, he parked but didn't get out. As I opened the door to leave, he suddenly spoke. "Next week, there's a charity gala. Will you come with me?" I turned to look at him. "You mean as your wife? Or as someone filling a role?" His gaze met mine, steady, unreadable. "As you." And for the first time in years, I saw warmth flicker behind his cold eyes. That night, lying in bed, I realized something had changed. The wall between us had cracked, not enough to break, but enough to let the light in. Little did I know, that gala would reveal a secret that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my husband. The week leading up to the gala felt strangely quiet, not the kind of silence that hurt, but one that hummed with anticipation. Jin didn't call, but every morning there was a delivery: fresh lilies, my favorite tea blend, once even a warm croissant from the little cafe I used to frequent before our marriage. He didn't sign any of them, but I knew it was him. It was the way the ribbon was tied, the neat precision of the handwriting on the note. "Breakfast matters," just 2 words. Yet it made my chest tighten. For the first time in years, I felt like he was trying. Not in grand gestures, but in quiet, deliberate steps. When the night of the gala finally arrived, I wore a simple, elegant black gown, nothing flashy, but it hugged my figure perfectly. My hair was pinned low, and I wore the diamond earrings Jin had given me on our first anniversary, the only gift he'd personally chosen. As I stood before the mirror, I whispered to my reflection, "Tonight, I'll face him not as a wife seeking love, but as a woman who deserves truth." When I arrived at the venue, flashes from cameras blinded me momentarily. The grand chandelier above cast golden light across the hall. And then I saw him. Jin stood at the top of the staircase, tall, composed and heartbreakingly handsome in his tailored black suit. His expression was unreadable, but the moment his eyes met mine, everything else faded away. He descended the steps slowly, offering his arm with quiet dignity. "You look beautiful," he said, almost under his breath. It was so soft, I almost thought I imagined it. As we entered the ballroom, people turned to look. We had always been the perfect couple in public, polished, distant, enviable. But tonight, something was different. When Jin placed his hand at the small of my back, it wasn't for the cameras. It was careful, protective. For the first time, I didn't feel like a trophy. We mingled with guests, smiled for photos, made polite conversation. Everything seemed fine until I noticed a woman standing near the wine counter, staring at Jin with too much familiarity. Tall, elegant, red dress. I recognized her instantly. Clara, his ex-fiancée. My heart dropped. She was the woman he had almost married before me, the one he'd called off because she wasn't ready. At least, that's what the tabloid said. But seeing the way she looked at him now, like she knew something I didn't, made my stomach twist. When Jin noticed her, his expression froze for a moment. Then he looked away. But Clara approached anyway, smiling with the confidence of someone who still held power over the past. Jin, she greeted smoothly. It's been a while, Clara, he said evenly, his tone colder than usual. Her gaze flickered toward me. And you must be the wife. I've heard so much about you. I forced a polite smile. All good things, I hope. She laughed lightly. Of course. You've done what many couldn't, keep Jin by your side for this long. It was a subtle jab, but it landed. Jin's eyes darkened slightly. Clara, that's enough, but she just smirked and leaned closer to him. Do you still have that necklace I gave you? I saw it once in your drawer. When enough, he interrupted sharply. His voice was calm, but his jaw clenched hard. I froze. Necklace? Drawer? What was she talking about? The air grew thick. I could feel people glancing our way, curious. I wanted to leave, but my feet wouldn't move. Clara smiled sweetly, satisfied with the discomfort she caused. Enjoy your evening, both of you. Then she walked away, her perfume lingering like poison. When she disappeared into the crowd, I turned to Jin. What necklace? He didn't look at me. It's nothing. She's trying to provoke you. Then tell me what it is. He hesitated. That hesitation told me more than words ever could. I took a step back, feeling the walls close in. You said you were done with her, Jin. Was that a lie too? It's not like that, he said quietly. She was part of my past. I didn't think it mattered anymore. Then why do you still keep something she gave you? He didn't answer. The silence between us roared louder than the music around us. I turned away before he could see the hurt in my eyes. You know, Jin, I thought I was finally starting to understand you. But maybe you're just a puzzle that doesn't want to be solved. I walked out of the ballroom, ignoring the curious glances, the whispers. The rain had started again outside, light and cold. I didn't care that my dress was getting soaked. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Rina, I turned to see Jin, following me out, his face unreadable but his eyes desperate. Wait, he said. You're misunderstanding. Then explain. I shouted, my voice breaking. Why do you still keep pieces of her when you told me she meant nothing? He looked down, as if struggling with words he'd never learned to say. Because she almost destroyed me once. That necklace, it's not a token of love. It's a reminder of what? That trusting the wrong person can ruin everything. I froze. His voice was low, trembling slightly, the first crack in the cold armor he always wore. He took a step closer, his eyes glistening under the rain. When she left, I built walls to make sure no one could ever hurt me again. And then you came, stubborn, gentle and real. You scared me, Rina, because for the first time, I wanted to tear those walls down. But I didn't know how. The rain poured harder. His hair was soaked, his suit clinging to him. But he didn't care. He just looked at me, his expression raw and open. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for making you doubt what you mean to me." I felt something inside me shatter, the anger, the confusion, the longing, all tangled together. But I couldn't forgive him so easily. Not yet. I shook my head slowly. "You can't keep hiding behind pain forever, Jin. Love isn't safe. It's supposed to make you feel vulnerable." He closed his eyes for a moment, as if the truth stung. When he opened them again, he whispered, "Then teach me how." For a heartbeat, I couldn't speak. His words, so soft, so unguarded, made me realize that maybe he wasn't heartless at all. Maybe he was just someone who never learned how to love without fear. But before I could respond, a sudden flash of lightning illuminated the sky, and I noticed something strange in his eyes. Not fear, not guilt, but pain. He reached for his pocket and swayed slightly. "Jin?" I said, stepping closer. His lips moved, barely forming words. "Don't worry." Then his knees buckled. I gasped, catching him just before he hit the ground. "Jin, hey, look at me." His face was pale, his breathing shallow. Rainwater mixed with tears as I screamed for help. People rushed from the hall. Someone called an ambulance. I held him tightly, his head in my lap, my hands trembling. "Stay with me," I whispered. "Don't you dare leave now." His eyes fluttered open. For a second he looked at me, his lips curving faintly. "I never stopped watching you." Then he lost consciousness. I felt my heart stop, and that night, under the pouring rain, the man who never said "I love you" collapsed in my arms, leaving me with more questions than answers. The ambulance's siren sliced through the storm as I clung to Jin's hand, refusing to let go. His skin was cold to cold, and every second felt like an eternity. My gown was soaked, my hair clung to my face, but none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was the faint rise and fall of his chest. When we reached the hospital, doctors rushed him into the emergency room. They pushed me aside, telling me to wait. The double doors swung shut, leaving me staring at the red surgery in progress light. My hands shook uncontrollably. I sat there, drenched and shivering, the echo of his last words replaying in my mind. "I never stopped watching you." Hours passed. The rain had stopped outside, but inside, it felt like the storm had settled into my bones. Finally, Leo came running down the corridor. "Madam, what happened?" I could barely form words. "He collapsed during the gala. He just fell." Leo's face went pale. He pressed his lips together tightly. "He's been hiding it." My heart skipped. "Hiding what?" He looked down. "His condition. Mr. Jin was diagnosed months ago with a cardiac problem, stress-induced arrhythmia. The doctor told him to rest, but he refused. Said he couldn't afford weakness." I stared at him in disbelief. "He never told me." Leo sighed, guilt clouding his face. "He made us promise not to. He said he didn't want you to worry." Tears welled in my eyes. The image of him, standing strong and cold, suddenly shattered. Behind that stoic mask, he had been quietly fighting his own battle and facing it alone. After what felt like forever, the doctor finally emerged. I jumped to my feet. "He's stable for now," the doctor said calmly. "But his body is under strain. He needs complete rest and minimal stress. No arguments, no overworking. And emotionally, he shouldn't be left alone." Emotionally shouldn't be left alone. The irony was cruel. Jin had spent years building a world where he was alone. When I was finally allowed in, he lay on the hospital bed, pale and fragile beneath the white sheets. His oxygen tube moved faintly with each breath. For a man who always exuded power, seeing him this way broke something inside me. I sat beside him quietly, brushing his damp hair away from his forehead. "You idiot," I whispered softly. "Why didn't you tell me?" His fingers twitched slightly, as if reacting to my voice. I took his hand gently. "You spent all this time trying to protect yourself from pain. But you've only been hurting yourself more." That night, I didn't leave his side. I held his hand until dawn. When morning light filtered through the curtains, Jin stirred. His eyelids fluttered open, confusion flickering before his gaze softened as he saw me. "You're still here," he murmured weakly. I forced a small smile through the tears. "Where else would I go?" He tried to sit up, but I pressed him back gently. "Don't move. You're supposed to rest," he sighed, wincing. "I didn't want you to see me like this, vulnerable," I whispered, his lips curved faintly. "Pathetic? You're not pathetic," I said firmly. "You're just human, Jin. You bleed, you break, and you love, even if you don't know how to show it." He turned his head slightly, eyes glistening. "I thought loving someone meant protecting them from pain. I didn't realize that shutting them out caused it." That simple confession made my throat tighten. He closed his eyes briefly, breathing deeply. "When you asked me for a hug that day, I froze. Not because I didn't want to, but because I didn't think I deserved it. You were warm and I was everything cold in your life." My tears finally fell. "You're not cold, Jin. You just forgot what warmth feels like." His eyes opened again, meeting mine. "Then stay," he whispered. "Teach me how to feel it again." I didn't answer with words. Instead, I leaned forward and wrapped my arms around him carefully, mindful of the 4 lines. He stiffened at first, his body unfamiliar with the comfort, but slowly he relaxed. His heartbeat was faint but steady against my ear, and for the first time in our marriage, he didn't pull away. The days that followed were quiet, filled with the soft beeping of hospital machines and small conversations. I read to him from my sketchbook, showed him my drawings, even the ones I'd hidden. He listened silently, sometimes smiling faintly. Then one afternoon, he said something that made me pause. "I used to come to your art studio every Friday. I'd sit in the car and watch you teach the children through the window." I blinked in surprise. "You what?" He smiled faintly. "You'd laugh so easily." It made me jealous. Jealous of what? That the world got a version of you I didn't deserve to see. My heart clenched. "You could have had that version, Jin. All you had to do was look." He nodded slowly. "I'm looking now." It was in that moment I realized he wasn't the same man I married. The cold CEO was melting piece by piece, revealing someone fragile and painfully real underneath. But fate, cruel as it was, wasn't done testing us. A few days later, while I was getting his discharge papers, I overheard 2 nurses whispering outside the room. "She's here again. That woman in red. She said she's family." My stomach dropped. "Clara." When I returned to the room, Jin was sitting up, pale but awake, and Clara stood beside his bed, holding a bouquet of lilies, the same flowers he'd been sending me. I stopped at the doorway, my voice barely steady. "I didn't realize this hospital allowed EXCs in the family ward." Clara turned, smiling coolly. "Oh, I'm just visiting an old friend." "Then visit's over," I said, stepping inside. But Jin's expression wasn't cold. It was conflicted. That scared me more than anything. Clara placed the flowers down gently and looked at him. "You should've told her the truth, Jin. About me. About why you really married her." My breath caught. What is she talking about? Jin's face went pale. Clara, but she cut him off with a bitter laugh. You think lies stay buried forever? She deserves to know that your marriage wasn't love, it was a deal to save your company. The world tilted. I could barely hear my own heartbeat. Clara looked at me, then eyes sharp. You were his choice? Yes, but only because your father's company bailed his out. You weren't the woman he loved. You were his obligation. I stood frozen, my vision blurring. That's not true, right? I whispered, looking at Jin. He didn't answer. His silence was louder than any confession. In that instant, everything around me collapsed. The hospital room, the warmth, the hope. All of it. I stepped back, trembling. All this time, I thought your silence was love you didn't know how to express. But it was guilt. Rina, he tried, his voice hoarse. No, I said, my voice breaking. Don't. Not now. And before he could stop me, I turned and walked out of the room. Tears spilling freely. The man who had finally begun to open his heart had just shattered mine. That night, the mansion felt heavier than ever. The dinner table stretched endlessly between us, filled with untouched dishes and words that refused to come out. I kept my head down, poking at my food, pretending everything was fine. But inside, I was collapsing. Ethan finally broke the silence. I spoke to Dr. Lin today. She said, your stress levels are concerning. You've lost too much weight. His voice was low, almost hesitant, but I could hear the worry buried beneath. I looked up at him, tired. It's nothing. I just haven't had much appetite lately. You haven't had much peace lately either, he said quietly, setting his fork down. Because of me, I froze. He'd never admitted something like that before. When I didn't respond, he continued, you don't have to keep pretending, Clara. You can tell me what you want. I met his eyes, forcing a smile. What I want doesn't matter. It never has. He flinched slightly, like my words had struck deeper than he expected. After that, silence again. Just the sound of rain tapping against the glass. After dinner, I went upstairs and stood in front of the mirror. The woman staring back looked pale, empty. The girl who once dreamed of love had become a stranger to herself. That night, I lay awake beside Ethan, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. I wanted to reach out, just once, to touch his hand. But I didn't, because every time I reached out before, he turned away. The next morning, something inside me snapped. I decided I couldn't keep living like this, half alive, half-loved. At tea breakfast, I said it. Ethan, let's divorce. He didn't look up immediately. His fingers tightened around his coffee cup. Why? He asked, voice barely steady. Because I'm tired, I said. Tired of pretending we're okay. Tired of being invisible to you. He finally looked at me, eyes dark with something unreadable. You're not invisible to me. Then why does it feel that way every day? My voice cracked despite my efforts. You never smile. You never touch me. You never. I'm trying to protect you, he interrupted. From what? I asked bitterly. From love. He went silent. His jaw clenched, his eyes burning with something I couldn't decipher. And then he whispered, from myself. I blinked, startled. What does that even mean? But before he could answer, his phone rang. He excused himself and walked out, leaving me with a half-finished cup of tea and a heart that wouldn't stop trembling. That day, I packed a small suitcase. Not because I was certain, but because I needed to see if he'd even notice. When Ethan returned that night, the house was quiet. I was sitting by the door, suitcase beside me. He looked at it, then at me. "You're serious?" he said softly. I nodded. "I can't do this anymore." He took a slow step toward me. "Clara, please don't make this harder," I whispered. "I just need space. Maybe then we'll both find peace." But as I reached for the door handle, he suddenly grabbed my wrist. Not rough, but desperate. His hand trembled. "Don't go," he said, voice breaking. "Please," I froze. My heart skipped. This was the first time I'd ever seen Ethan, my cold, distant husband, sound so fragile. "Why?" I asked quietly. "Why now?" He swallowed hard, his grip tightening slightly. "Because if you walk out that door, I don't know if I'll survive it." My breath hitched. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then his hand slipped away, his expression shuddering again. "But if leaving makes you happy, I won't stop you." That night, I left. The city lights blurred through my tears as I rode away in the taxi. I didn't look back, though part of me wanted to. A few days later, I started working again, designing quietly in a small studio. I tried to rebuild myself piece by piece. But what I didn't expect was that Ethan would start appearing everywhere outside the studio. At the coffee shop, even standing by my apartment building at night. Just watching from afar. He never approached me. Never said a word. But those eyes, filled with something fierce and sorrowful, followed me everywhere. And then one day, everything changed. I got sick. Really sick. I collapsed at work from exhaustion. When I woke up in the hospital, Ethan was there, his hand wrapped tightly around mine. His eyes red rimmed like he hadn't slept in days. "Clara," he whispered. "Don't do that again. Please. I can't lose you." For the first time, I saw raw emotion, fear, guilt, love all tangled together in his voice. And for the first time, I wondered, was I wrong about him all along? When I opened my eyes again, the faint scent of disinfectant filled the room. The steady beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound breaking the silence. I blinked a few times before my vision cleared. Ethan sat beside me, still in his office clothes, his tie loosened, eyes hollow from sleeplessness. "Ethan?" My voice came out faint, barely above a whisper. He immediately looked up, relief flooding his expression. "You're awake." I tried to sit up, but he gently pressed a hand against my shoulder. "Don't. The doctor said you need rest. You've been unconscious for nearly 12 hours. 12 hours? I murmured, staring at the ceiling. "Guess I really did overwork myself." He looked down, his hand still hovering over mine like he wanted to hold it but wasn't sure if he was allowed to. "You didn't just overwork yourself. You've been neglecting your health for months." Because of me, I turned my head to look at him. "You keep saying that, Ethan. Because of you. But what does that even mean?" He exhaled shakily, raking a hand through his hair. "It means I was a coward. I thought that keeping my distance would protect you from me, from the things I can't control." I frowned slightly. "Things you can't control?" He gave a short, bitter laugh. "Emotions, memories, the ghosts of my past that won't leave me alone." For the first time, he looked truly broken. The cold CEO who once terrified half of his staff now looked like a man who'd been fighting invisible battles and losing. He continued softly, "When I was young, I lost someone. She was my first love. A car accident. I was driving. I still remember her saying she was cold just before the crash. Since then, I can't handle affection. Every time someone reaches for me, I freeze like my body remembers that night." I stared at him, my heart tightening. All this time, I thought his distance was rejection. But it was pain. Deep, Unhealed pain, Ethan. I whispered. He looked at me with eyes full of regret. When you asked me for a hug that day, I wanted to. God, I wanted to. But I froze. Not because I didn't love you, Clara, but because I loved you so much it terrified me. I thought if I got too close, I'd hurt you too. Tears welled up in my eyes, falling before I could stop them. All the nights I'd cried, all the times I'd felt unwanted, it all felt so small now compared to what he'd been carrying alone. I reached out my hand slowly, trembling, unsure if he'd pull away again. But this time, he didn't. Instead, he took my hand in both of his, holding it like it was something fragile he was scared to lose. His grip was warm, desperate, real. I'm sorry, he said. I should've told you. I should've let you in. But I didn't know how. I smiled weakly, my tears blurring everything. I would've waited, you know. I just needed to know that you cared. He closed his eyes, lowering his forehead to our joined hands. I've never cared about anyone more. The room went silent again, but this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was healing. The kind of silence that follows after truth has finally been spoken. After that day, something shifted between us. Ethan insisted on staying at the hospital with me every night, sleeping on the couch, helping the nurses, making sure I ate. He even brought flowers, clumsy, mismatched ones that looked like he'd picked them himself. One evening, as I was watching the sunset through the hospital window, he walked in holding 2 cups of tea. Green tea, he said awkwardly. You used to drink this before bed. I smiled softly. You remember? I remember everything about you, he said quietly. There was again the warmth in his voice, the gentleness I thought he'd never show me. I laughed softly. You've changed. He shook his head. No, Clara. I've always been this way. I just finally stopped hiding it. When I was discharged a few days later, he drove me home. But instead of taking me to our old mansion, he surprised me. The car stopped in front of a small white house with climbing ivy and a garden full of wildflowers. What is this? I asked, stepping out. He smiled, a rare, genuine smile that made my heart ache. Our new home. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere that doesn't carry the ghosts of what we both used to be. Inside, the rooms were simple, sunlit and peaceful. There was no trace of the cold, glassy world we used to live in. I turned to him, my heart full. You really did all this. I told you, he said, stepping closer. I want to start over. With you. If you'll let me. I stared into his eyes, searching for the old coldness. But it was gone. All that was left was a man who'd finally decided to face his own heart. And for the first time, I reached out hesitant, trembling. Can I hug you? He froze for a split second. The same old fear flickered across his eyes, but then something changed. He exhaled deeply and opened his arms. When I stepped into his embrace, his body stiffened, but only for a moment. Then, slowly, he relaxed. His arms wrapped around me, firm and warm, his breath unsteady against my shoulder. It was imperfect, shaky, but it was real. I buried my face in his chest, tears falling freely. You did it, I whispered. He held me tighter. No, he murmured, voice trembling. We did. In that moment, all the walls, all the pain, all the unspoken fears melted away. For the first time, I felt the warmth I'd been longing for. For the first time, Ethan didn't freeze. He held me like I was the only thing that kept him breathing, and I realized then love doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes quietly, after years of silence. It takes time, courage, and a little faith to thaw a frozen heart, but when it finally does, it's beautiful. The following weeks felt like living in a dream I never thought I'd see. Gone were the echoing halls of the cold mansion, the endless business calls at dinner, and the unspoken distance between us. Our new house was smaller, but it was filled with laughter, soft light, and the kind of peace I'd always wished for. Every morning, Ethan would wake up early and make breakfast. At first, he was hopeless in the kitchen, burning toast, overboiling eggs, and confusing sugar with salt once. I couldn't stop laughing. He stood there with that familiar stoic face, holding a ruined omelette, and muttered, "At least the effort counts." I teased him. "You used to negotiate million-dollar deals, but you can't even handle scrambled eggs?" He smirked, pretending to be offended. Maybe I needed the right reason to learn. His eyes softened. "Now I have won." That one sentence made my chest tighten with warmth. Each day brought small changes that spoke louder than grand gestures ever could. He'd text me in the middle of his workday, "Have you eaten? Don't skip lunch." He'd show up at my studio, pretending to be lost, then stay to help me arrange designs. At night, we'd sit on the porch, watching the sunset, while sharing tea and quiet stories of our pasts. But happiness, I learned, isn't a straight road. It tests you. And just when I thought life had settled into calmness, a new shadow appeared. One evening, Ethan came home unusually quiet. His shoulders were tense, his phone kept buzzing, and when I asked what was wrong, he only said, "It's nothing. Just work." But I knew better. His eyes told a different story. Later that night, while cleaning up, I heard him on the phone. His tone was low, sharp. I said no. "That chapter of my life is over. Don't contact me again." I froze in the hallway. The voice on the other end, female, cold, familiar. I recognized it. Sophia, the woman who used to be his assistant and, as rumor had it, the one who once confessed to loving him before we married. When he hung up, I stepped forward quietly. "Sophia called you." Ethan turned, startled. "Clara, why is she contacting you again?" I asked. My voice wasn't angry, just tired. "I thought we'd left all that behind," he sighed, rubbing his forehead. "She's trying to stir things up. Some old project resurfaced. She's using it as an excuse to reach out." But I told her it's over. "Then why do you look so worried?" I asked softly. He hesitated. "Because she knows things. About the company. About me. She could twist it." My chest tightened. "Ethan, are you hiding something from me?" His silence felt like a blade. When he finally spoke, his words were heavy. "Before I met you, I wasn't clean. I made deals I shouldn't have. I hurt people I shouldn't have. I've spent years trying to fix that. But people like Sophia, they remember." I took a step closer. "Then let me help you." He shook his head. "No, Clara. This is my mess. You shouldn't have to be dragged into it, Ethan." I whispered, tears threatening to fall. "Marriage means sharing both peace and pain. If you're afraid, face it with me." He looked at me for a long time, then finally nodded. "You're right. I've spent too long facing everything alone." Not anymore. The next day, he arranged a meeting with Sophia with me by his side. She was waiting at a downtown CAF, elegant and calculating as ever. When she saw me, her smile faltered slightly. "Mrs. Blackwell, I didn't expect you to come." "I'm his wife," I said calmly. "Of course I'd come." Sophia looked at Ethan with a smirk. "You've changed, Ethan. The old you would never bring emotions into business. He replied coldly, that old me no longer exists. She leaned back, crossing her arms. I just came to remind you of what we shared. Secrets, deals, things that could ruin you if they got out. I felt Ethan stiffen beside me. Sophia's smile widened. Unless, of course, there's something in it for me. Before Ethan could speak, I leaned forward. You think you're holding power over him. But you're wrong. Whatever you think he owes you, he's already paid. You can try to expose him, but what would that make you? A woman clinging to a past that doesn't exist anymore? Her expression faltered for the first time. I continued, my voice steady. You said Ethan's changed. He has. Because now, he's not afraid to stand beside someone who truly loves him. Sophia's gaze darkened, but she said nothing. She stood up, muttered something under her breath, and walked out. When she was gone, Ethan exhaled shakily, almost collapsing back in his chair. You didn't have to do that, I know, I said softly. But I wanted to. He looked at me with something raw in his eyes, admiration, gratitude, maybe even awe. You're stronger than I ever gave you credit for. I smiled faintly. You just never gave yourself the chance to see it. That night, he held me longer than usual. No words, no explanations, just quiet breathing and warmth. Later, as I drifted to sleep in his arms, I thought about everything we'd been through. The distance, the silence, the heartbreak, and now, this fragile piece we'd built with our own hands. Love, I realized, wasn't about perfection. It was about showing up, even when it was hard. About learning to hold someone who once froze at the thought of being touched. Ethan had finally learned to hold me. And I had finally learned to believe in us. But I didn't know that one more test awaited us. Because sometimes, when life gives you peace, it also hides a storm right behind it. And that storm was about to hit. It started subtly, a misplaced file, a cancelled meeting, a vague warning from one of Ethan's colleagues. Nothing seemed urgent at first, just the kind of small ripples that could easily be ignored. But the unease in Ethan's eyes told me otherwise. One evening, as we were sharing tea on the porch, he broke the silence. Clara, there's something I need to tell you. I set my cup down, sensing the gravity in his tone. What is it? He hesitated, then finally said, the company is under threat. Someone's trying to sabotage a deal I worked years to secure. It's not just business, they want me out, and they don't care who gets hurt in the process. My chest tightened. And you didn't tell me sooner because I thought I could handle it alone. I didn't want to drag you into this. I reached for his hand. Ethan, we in this together. Always. If you fight alone, it will break you again. Let me help. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay. Together, the next days were a whirlwind. We worked side by side, uncovering forged contracts, misleading emails, and even bribed officials. Every time Ethan grew tense, I reminded him to breathe, to trust me. One night, as we pored over documents in the study, I noticed him pause, staring at a photo on his desk. It was a picture of us, taken on the first night we moved into the new house. Ethan's eyes were soft, filled with a mix of nostalgia and love. Clara, he murmured, I used to be so afraid. Afraid to let anyone in. Afraid of being hurt again. I smiled gently. And now, I'm not afraid, he whispered. Not with you. We leaned toward each other slowly, our foreheads touching. No words were needed. The trust, the love, the shared hardships, they all converged in that simple touch. But peace, it seemed, never lasts long. The day of the final confrontation came. We'd gathered all the evidence to expose the people trying to sabotage Ethan's company. I stood beside him as he faced the board, facing the men and women who had tried to manipulate, deceive, and control him. He was composed, yet I saw the tension beneath the surface. When he spoke, his voice was steady, commanding, but there was a softness in his gaze that always belonged to me alone. "This ends today," he said, sliding the documents across the table. "Everything here is proof of manipulation, deceit, and betrayal. No one will use me or my company again." As murmurs spread through the boardroom, I reached out and held his hand under the table. He glanced at me, a faint smile tugging at his lips. After the meeting, victory was ours. Ethan's company was secure, and the threats dissolved under scrutiny. But the triumph was sweeter because we'd faced it together. That evening, we returned home to the quiet warmth of our garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky with shades of pink and gold. Ethan turned to me, his hands cupping my face gently. "Clara, I love you," he said softly. "I never said it enough. And I never will forget it again." I laughed softly, tears in my eyes. "I love you too, Ethan. Even when you were cold. Even when you froze at a hug, I always knew you cared." He hesitated, then leaned down, our lips meeting in a kiss that was gentle, lingering, and full of promise. When we finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine. We survived everything: pain, fear, past shadows. And now? His voice trailed off. "Now?" I prompted. "Now," he said with a grin, "we build a life where we don't have to hide anymore. Where love isn't scary, it's everything." I smiled, leaning into him, feeling the warmth of his embrace like sunlight after a long winter. For the first time, I truly believed it. The cold sea I once thought incapable of love had finally learned to open his heart. And I had finally learned to trust it completely. Outside, the first stars of the evening began to shine, tiny points of light scattered across the dark sky. And as I held Ethan close, I whispered, "We made it through the storm. Together." He kissed my forehead softly. "Together. Always." And in that quiet, perfect moment, I realized, love isn't about grand gestures or perfect timing. It's about showing up every single day and choosing each other through fear, pain, and even frozen hearts. We had chosen each other, and that choice would last forever. That's all for today, folks. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.